The most important cultural differences are categorized in three different areas: individualism, collectivism, self construal, and face concerns. So, what is individualism, collectivism? A myriad of cultures can be characterized as individualistic in orientation. Members of these cultures will oftentimes assert a more independent lifestyle, and individual goals are going to have much more value and take precedence over group goals. In contrast, members of collectivist cultures embrace the concept of community and unity and prioritize collective goals versus that of personal ones. A group member from an individualistic cultural background might make an assumption that other members will voice an opinion, which is ultimately a reflection of individual viewpoints opposed to that of a collective opinion. This could be motivated by a need for uniqueness, independence, self sufficiency, and autonomy. A member of a collectivist culture might deviate from their own opinions, be indirect, and defer to the views of a group as a whole. Selflessness, societal growth, and centralizing roles of community and family are just a few motivators in a collectivist society. So, all in all, individualism is a social pattern that consists of loosely linked individuals who view themselves as independent of collectives and prioritize their personal goals over the goals of others. Collectivism, on the other hand, has these norms and institutions that promote interdependence versus independence of individuals through emphasis on social obligations. Otzel actually studied several national cultures and came to the conclusion that individualistic cultures include the US and Germany, whereas collectivistic cultures include China and Japan. Now, one important thing to note is that this doesn't necessarily mean that there is overlap between the cultures. The individualistic culture and ideals of the US are going to vary greatly than that of Germany. But it's important to understand that there are these certain traits and things that go into these different cultures, whether it's individualistic and collectivistic, excuse me, that's going to make that country or nation what it is. Self construal. Self construal, simply put, is how members choose to perceive themselves. In, Independent and interdependent are two ways to describe this idea of self construal. Those who think in independent ways will see themselves as unique and distinctive. There's a certain disparity in their thoughts and feelings compared to others' individuals' thoughts and feelings. In contrast, those who see themselves as interdependent will focus more on how they are connected to others. Independent self construals are typically more prevalent in individualistic cultures, whereas interdependent construals are common in collectivist cultures. When group members evaluate their success based on personal goals and others evaluate success based on group goals, misunderstanding and discord are inevitable, and this is where that conflict will arise. I chose this example from The Office, where Andy is a regional manager and has to meet a certain quota for selling paper at the company he works at called Dunder Mifflin. His boss tells him, "You need to meet this certain quota." And he doesn't hound it on him, but Andy becomes obsessed and wants to impress his boss as much as possible. So he takes it under his wing and relays this information to his cohort and tells them, like, "Hey guys, we have to get this certain amount of paper sold by this certain time." And, the group is not necessarily receptive to working harder than they actually have to. And that's when Andy comes up with these certain incentives that start off very lukewarm and are pretty basic. He starts, inviting them to collect these certain tchotchkes and things that they don't really care about. But once his incentives become much more outlandish, which at the end he chooses to get a tattoo on his behind, that's when the group becomes motivated to reach this quota. Now, Andy has just totally thrown himself under the bus to get this done. And the group just is so ecstatic and so enamored by this idea that they get to see Andy get this tattoo on his behind. And I thought this was such a comical and interesting way to kind of relay this idea of self construal, where everyone just has their own personal goals. And now that there's this certain misunderstanding between, the cohort and Andy, it just creates a lot of fun in the show, but can be a very serious issue in real life, problems. Let's just go ahead and skip to the next slide. Okay, and lastly, we've got face concerns. This is where you're going to see the differences in how members manage their personal image. Self face is going to be the concern for your own image. Other face is concern for the image of other people. And mutual face includes concerns about the relationships. So, cultures are going to differ in terms of how they are going to manage these different types of face. Some cultures, for example, are going to be somewhat self effacing, and members of these cultures prefer to build the face of the others over asserting self face. In other cultures, self face is the prime focus, sometimes at the expense of others. A culturally mixed group could have some members who constantly try to make themselves good, other members who work to make others look good, and still others who want the group to look good as a whole.